All right, so we'll get started with our next talk. I don't think he knows that I'm going to do this, but during Paul and I's original introductions, we also wanted to mention a couple other people as well. We do have one of the founders of Security BSides here. If you're not familiar, his name is Jack Daniel, and he has the most epic beard in the world, standing over here in the corner. And for anybody that got here after our original introductions, there is also a get-together tonight as well after this around 7:30. If you go to the conference website, you can see the directions, the map, all that kind of information there. It's down at the Havana Cigar Club on 24 Quaker Ave in Warwick. So we're going to be down there as well afterward tonight. Let's see. I think I had something else to tell you guys about, but I can't remember. Also, all our talks through this entire conference are going to be online. We do have Adrian Crenshaw here as well. I don't know if everybody knows Adrian. He's also Iron Geek. If you go to irongeek.com, he has a lot of videos there, lots of great stuff. So all of our conference videos will be there. Tell all your friends they can go watch them. I didn't really advertise that so much just so I could get you all here. That was kind of more important. So we also want to say thank you to Adrian for doing this for us. All right, this time I'm going to wear my glasses, so hopefully I can read a little bit better than I did last time. Our next speaker is Jim Peeler. Jim has 20 years experience in the information protection and security, 18 years with Boeing Company and 6 years with UTC. Mr. Peeler has his CISSP, ethical hacking, penetration testing certifications, is a graduate of MIT's Sloan School of Systems Engineering, and is completing his MS in Systems Security Engineering at Stevens Institute this year. Jim Peeler.
Thank you. I'll start off by saying the speaker that went in front of me was actually very good for this presentation. His ability to show you some of the risks and vulnerabilities that are out there is exactly what this talk is about. I'm going to center on something kind of new for me, the small, medium businesses. As I've been going back through school, what I've noticed is that there's a whole group out there of industry people, basically businesses that are less than 100 people. And they are becoming a huge target for the cyber criminals. So this discussion is about that group of people and what we're going to try and start looking at through ISC Squared and ISACA to set up some programs to try and help them. So my first part is...
Sorry, wasn't getting audio through this for some reason, and I don't know why. So I'm gonna go ambient.
Continue. Sounds like you got too much gain.
Yep. Somehow or another, it stopped giving me audio. I don't think I changed anything up there significantly.
We should go ambient. We'll just talk about fix it before we talk soon.
Sorry.
So the next part is if you look through, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Verizon databases that talk about the database breaches. Part of what I'm showing here is that when you look at small medium businesses, in 2012, 67% of all the major data breaches were in the small medium business categories. That number was very high in 2012. 570 data breaches. The typical data breach here was more than 1 million records, and in 2013 it looks like it got a little better, but actually it didn't. There was a smaller number of data breaches reported, but the actual volume of records stolen were considerably more. And if you look out at Symantec this year, the big thing you notice is that the numbers here really don't show it. There's a 31% increase in growth of targeting the small and medium businesses for attacks. That's, for this one, was businesses that had under 250 employees. In 2012, that was up 18%, so you can see that in 1 year, it's doubled. for the small medium businesses. And the major reason that the cyber criminals are going after the small medium businesses is they basically do not know how to defend themselves for cyber breaches. So they become just a very easy target. And again, cyber criminal means they're after it for the dollars. This is not about espionage. This is not about anonymous or somebody hacking the system to get in, just to exploit it for the fun of exploiting it. It's not about script kiddies or anything like that. This is about people that are basically out there to steal your money. Okay? So part of what we need to do is to go back through and look at and say, okay, exactly what is the way that some of these small, medium businesses can defend themselves? And as you guessed, my talk is about looking at the security risk management frameworks. I think we're all pretty familiar with security risk management frameworks. They're the things of, do the threats, identify the vulnerabilities, and apply the countermeasures. That's basically it. There's a whole lot of very popular ones from the NIST 800 series to kind of the new generation called the ISO 27000 series. SACA has got their own called COVID. There's also Octave, and I've thrown in this one because it's kind of the grandfather of all of the risk management frameworks. It's from Australia and New Zealand. It came out about probably 15 years ago. It's now been converted to an ISO 3100 risk management framework, and it is still there. If you've ever worked with risk management frameworks and played with the 5x5 cube, you're playing with the Australia and New Zealand risk management framework. The next thing I want to do is contrast these risk management frameworks, and then I'm going to also compare risk management versus audit management. So kind of think of it this way. Well, a lot of times risk management is looked at as proactive and audit management is passive. So by the time you find it with audit management, the breach has already occurred. But as like the previous speaker said, sometimes it takes people 2 to 3 months to even know that they've been breached. That's a lot of time for somebody to mine a huge amount of records. Okay? And then finally what I'm going to do is take an alternative approach and use something called the House of Quality, which shows how small, medium businesses might be able to begin to embrace these larger risk management frameworks, but meet certain objectives that I found in working with some of the small, medium businesses. So the next thing is, with any of us when we're doing security risks, the first thing you have to do is identify what's called the critical information. The critical or sensitive information is basically whatever the cyber criminal is after. A lot of times it centers on these two areas right here. Your personal identification, which most of you have heard about. You don't put your social security up on the internet anymore because people will open up Visa accounts against you. Payment card industry, this is where they're going after your cards. So when you go into a small, medium business, you swipe your card. A lot of people worry about, well, is the teller going to go back there and actually write down my numbers? That's actually the least of your concerns. The big concern is, can somebody sit with a man in the middle attack and mine not only yours, but hundreds of patrons' payment card industry information. Other sensitive information that a lot of people don't think about is in the type of thing that I'm looking at is I'm working with some of the restaurants, and they do things like sponsorship. Little League, they sponsor bowling leagues, things like that. It's amazing how much information is put up in a small, medium business on just things that they sponsor. The other one is the contractors that work for them. A lot of these people do not do background checks. And probably in your industry, in my industry, that would be a focus and a major concern. But they don't think about that. They're just not aware of who are some of the people that's trying to get to this information. The big thing that the small medium businesses actually have a lot of time struggling with is trying to accurately determine what's their top 10 risks. You can go in and every day that risk number will change and the contents of that risk will change in a small medium business. So they need something that has consistency to it. So this is basically how you determine which security and risk management framework that you're going to look at. The first step is you got to look at the inputs over here. And those inputs are what is in each one of these risk management frameworks and whether you use the whole thing or parts of one. You have to go through and determine from a set of standards what's the best way to start your planning. The next part is the important part for the small medium businesses, and that is they have a payment card industry set of security requirements that they must adhere to now. These are part of the new sets of laws that are coming in. It used to be like the computer fraud laws and stuff, but more and more are getting to where they're holding the small medium businesses accountable for these data breaches. So these two pieces right here are now becoming guidelines, and soon most of them will become law for them. So that puts the manager of the small medium business as a stakeholder in it. Yes?
Do you find that the security requirements and laws are beneficial to small medium business, or that they're more of an imposition?
You're a great lead-in candidate. Hold that for about 6 more slides, and then you'll see the answer. One of the big things that a lot of people skip is you've got to do some sort of internal working. You've got to generate some sort of work product or standard work when you're doing these risk management frameworks. The big thing is whatever you do,
Echo.
okay, better? Whatever you do, you want to capture your work that you're doing. The work that you're doing is important because what you'll find is if you go through this repetitively, you actually begin to tweak it for the individual SMB. That's a very important step because you end up going from, something a mile wide to something that's a few tens of feet wide. And this is really how you're targeting and improving your business. The other one is metrics. If you have a data breach, you must actually prove that you followed a framework and you generated 3 or 4 very important pieces. These pieces are over here on this side. You must have some sort of a security policy. Otherwise, nobody really knows what you did and how you did it. You've got to do employee training. We call this security awareness training. It's not sitting there being repetitive, telling somebody, hey, you've got to follow some sort of physical staff security or operation security. It's going through and showing people videos, kind of like what you saw in the previous one, and you see throughout these presentations. This is just how easy it is to break something down and break into it. And the other one is this one. This is a constantly moving target. This is not a static piece of information. Your top 10 risks will change with the threat landscape. And the threat landscape is changing and evolving very, very quickly. So, kind of leading into the question was asked of me, what are these risk management frameworks? The NIST standard 830, 853 is a very large volume. It has about 160 some security controls in here. This is a must-have if you're into businesses like I am, the Boeings, the UTCs, the Pratt Whitney Sikorsky's, the General Electrics. If you're dealing with any sort of federal contract, you must abide, you must follow this procedure. They drill it into you. And it's very simple. Identify the threat, look at the vulnerabilities, determine the likelihood of how often those threats would apply to you, and then begin your risk mitigation. And you just keep looping over and over and over through it, identifying it. The problem here is it's a set of security controls that usually have to be developed into requirements, flows down to subcontractors, and as you can guess, how would you apply this to a small medium business? It's too big, it's too cumbersome. The next one is the ISO 27000 series, and again, you can kind of see a trend that's going to start here. They go through the risk identification, evaluation, treat the risk, but this is really aimed at companies that have large infrastructure for data centers. It's about how to manage risk from an information security standpoint. So again, it has a lot of involvement, and again, it's aimed at kind of the wrong target. SMBs don't have data centers, they have maybe 1 or 2 PCs. This one is a very interesting one. This one is beginning to be approachable from small, medium businesses. The only problem with this one is it's based upon people's knowledge. So if SMBs had access to people like you in this room, this would be probably a very good risk management framework. But when I'm in the business, a restaurant business of serving food and catering to people, information security people are kind of dull as waiters. You know, unless we're in this forum. So the last one, again, is the Australia-New Zealand standard. And the advantage to this, if you look, the NIST is very close to it. That's because they took a lot of things from it. And it goes through, and it's it actually drops through very quickly for identifying risks. The problem with this one is it's not in depth about treating the risk. It's very good about identifying them, and it's very good about mitigating the risk if you know how to mitigate risk correctly. So this one's a little bit of an eye chart for you, but it goes through and looks at the differences. And what I broke them into is the major categories, the methods. So when you look up there, you'll see, and I don't need to read to you, but each one of these has a strength and a weakness. And when you look at it, a lot of these are things where you're thinking about how do I set up a risk management for, 10, 20 small, medium businesses. You can quickly look at this and go, oh, none of these fit. I have to cannibalize out of them, and again, not even the parts across one part here are what I would use. But let me kind of walk through some of them. Octave is very good because you're conducting workshops. When you're conducting workshops, you're involving people. You're involving people in the risk management part of it, and they are now taking ownership. When you look at the next one down, the assessment team, the thing is, the assessment team needs to work on details. So this is the working group of people trying to assess the risk. This has a set of questionnaires. They're actually very good. If they're tailored to the PCI security requirements, they can become something very well. Again, Octave, workshop-based. The ISO, it uses the NIST as the standards. So again, you can see when it comes to information gathering, checklists seem to be the more positive way for gathering how the risks are going to be identified and then mitigated. The one thing here is most small medium businesses don't have an HR department. So therefore, it becomes the manager. The manager needs to realize that he needs to set these here called mission critical. If you can't determine what the critical information or sensitive information is, then the bad guy's going to win. Again, going through here, role definition. We all know what that means. Even in a small, medium business, some people need to take on certain roles in the security part, and that gets you through it. And then, you know, the final piece in here, you've got to document what you're doing. If you don't document, there's no way you create a security policy. There's no way that once you have a data breach, that you can actually show you did anything to try and alleviate that data breach. So, audits versus risk management. As you can see up here, there's two approaches, and both audits and risk assessments are designed to detect new risks to the system. They're also a good way of checking and enforcing what your current corrective action plans are on it. But the differences are pretty big in here. You know, when you look at it, risk management basically defines the front part. Audit management defines what I call the passive part. So, yeah, you can verify controls are in place, but how do you know they're the correct controls? You have to do audits in order to determine the correct controls. When you're doing audits, you're basically evaluating the existing risk structure. If that risk structure is correct, your audits and doing your audit logs will catch things. If they're not, you're out in space. The last one is audits really have been set up more for going into what's called the SOX area now. You know, the big business of independent auditing. It's not really going to help a small, medium business. And then preparing for a crisis here, which means a data breach, is after the fact. So most small, medium businesses don't want to be in this bottom line right here. So I'll let you read through this. This is basically what you need to look at when you're doing a risk assessment. You have point of sales, and you have a lot of things of just, how easy it is, how much low-hanging fruit is in there. But the one thing that really kind of comes up in here is when you're looking at PCI compliances, okay, some of the things they ask you is, have you addressed the passwords? Have you looked at how you're disconnecting from idle sessions? And how often do you change the vendor passwords? Now, maybe to you and I, that seems like intuitive, smart. To a lot of the small, medium businesses, when you ask them, have you changed the vendor password on the router? You get literally the deer in the headlights look. If they're using applications for databases like back office, a lot of them look at it, and when you ask them how many controls have they applied from the PCI or PII industries, they have no idea what you're talking about. Okay? So, when you ask them about a security posture index for back office, does anybody in here know what a security posture index is for databases? Yeah, it's not easy. It's something that has to be calculated. It basically looks at, have you addressed the cross-scripting in the databases? It's that sort of information. There's a whole series of security controls that are aimed at, how you fix SQL injection and cross-scripting. And those are, as we saw in the previous one, great access points for mining a whole lot of data. The only problem here is what they're mining is either your personal information or your credit card information. So what is it that I'm proposing? This is what I'm proposing. This is basically how you go about identifying risk very quickly. You do things like you put in the PII, your personal information compliance guidelines. state by state. This is information that's available on the internet. The PCI DSS security compliances can be picked off the PCI DSS site. Yes?
Tell me this is available on our website. So I want to copy this.
Okay,
Tell me this is online somewhere.
this is.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is, you can put in House of Quality into Google. It will take you to one of the MIT sites, and this Excel worksheet is there. And what I'm going to do is walk through basically how you put in the left side and how you put in the top side. And then this part right here is exactly what I put there. That is, everybody's an equal player. Everybody tries to determine what is the risk to their business. The advantage here is you're pulling people in, you're giving them ownership, and you're also conducting at the same time security awareness training. Coming out at the bottom, you know a weighting exercise. I think we all know what a weighting exercise is, but the advantage it gives you when you're done is your risk priorities. Most of this activity takes 2 hours, and it's amazing in 2 hours what you can accomplish. It gives people really an idea of today, what's their top 10 risks. In 3 months, this should be done again, because nothing is staying the same. The threat landscape is evolving. The cyber criminals are getting better and better on this. And so, in a nutshell, this is what I'm going to go through. I'm going to hit a conclusion, and then I'm going to go through. I have two others that I added on the end. But what I want to draw your attention to is, the small medium businesses out there, they need help. They need help from professionals like us. 60% of their point of sales devices are breached. This is the actual thing that you swipe your credit card through. Okay? That results in stolen credentials. And again, stolen credentials can be stolen from the point of sale device, or, gee, what's the password on my laptop? Could it be dealer, or could it be PASSWD? Again, going back to the initial slide, it's amazing how many people use their wife's name, their kid's name, their dog's name as a password. A little bit of PII, and most of you can probably either socially engineer or hack most of these things very easily. This is kind of one of the things that I thought was interesting. A lot of people worry about the people that are taking your information or taking your payment card information. Out of, thousands of data breaches, less than 10% are actually traced back to people. So in other words, people are basically honest here. And that's something to consider. 20% bulletproof hardware. It's amazing here of the people that are coming to help you, the people that are doing maintenance, who do you know who they are? And when somebody shows up, representing, a maintenance company, are they really from that company? A lot of people never think to look at somebody twice when they're wearing a uniform. It's sad, but that opens up basically a 20% breach. So this is easy stuff for criminals to grab. Another one here, not really a good statistic, but 75% of the small medium businesses never know they're breached. They rely on somebody like the police or somebody else, like the gentleman before me, that reports things. And then they look at it and they go, oh, I could have been breached too. Now, one of the things that you got to consider in here is, you look at it and go, well, gee, the small medium businesses, how will they affect my company? Well, if I can breach a small medium business that does business with you, okay, and for some reason your purchasing department or your Your HR department needs to click on links in my website, on my SMB. You're a perfect candidate for what's called the water hole attack. That's a big crocodile laying just below the surface, waiting for somebody to inadvertently come along. You know, we all know, don't click on the links in email. Don't click on, links that have great big numbers on them. But when you go to a small, medium business, do you ever think about not clicking on that link? Probably not. Most of you are there to do that. You're a perfect candidate, and a data breach now extends into your company. Okay? So, what does it look like? This is the payment card industry, the 12 security requirements that a company has to get to basically a 95% compliance. If they don't get to a 95% compliance, most banks won't allow them to go to this step right here. Now you can look through this, and a lot of this stuff looks like, gee, it's very, very interesting. Stuff that most of us maybe would look at and go, this is not a big deal. To somebody that's not really that computer literate, this is an eyesore. So this is something to look at. This is why some of these folks need help. How do you do the assessment over here? If you look down the right side, you'll see what I've put together is basically the information that you need to feed into the top. So across the top is what the stakeholder needs to get out of this. That's going to determine the risks that that company faces. These requirements are then what needs to be scored by the people that are working in that small, medium business. If you put all this together, the weighting comes in very quickly, and boom, out come your top 10 risks. The advantage that you've just done is you determine the risk. The process that you've run through is your security policy. When you've engaged people in determining and taking ownership of the vulnerabilities in that system, you've done your training. If you look over there on the right, one of the big things that's always asked, have people gone through training? Do you have a policy? Have you determined your risk? Do you actually know what people are after in your business? And this is one of two approaches. The second one is the personal information. This is probably something that anybody should be interested in, from your business to a small, medium business to any business. And that is just how well is your personal information being protected. This is your name, this is your social security, your date of birth, access to your driver's license number, anything like that. Because once somebody gets 3 or 4 of those factors, they can go into Google, they can reverse engineer the name off of, the white pages for the telephone numbers. It's very, very easy to begin reverse engineering or social engineering the rest of the information out. And the big thing here is, once you get through with this, again, you determine another top 10 set of risks that can apply to your business. So the first one, mainly with the PCI, has to do about keeping the customer's information safe. This one is keeping the customer's information safe, your employees' information safe, and if you're a sponsor or any other organization, that those people know that you're also keeping their information safe. Okay? And I think that is about the end of my presentation. So, questions? Yes, sir.
So, you covered PCI, PII, PHI. I work on the side with a couple of full practitioners. New healthcare reform being forced into electronic health records, certificates, all this electronic, same idea with PCI, PII.
Right.
But on the healthcare side, let's throw HIPAA in there.
Right.
It becomes this huge mess trying to figure out where the risk is, how to mitigate it. what's required, what's not.
Right. So the idea
Can you
here,
repeat the question just for the?
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the idea is the public health information, and including the HIPAA information. So again, the purpose here is that's more or less the next big step up. But yes, the idea is you should be able to take this sort of a risk framework and go through and generate the same set of risks. The problem that you've got in the public health, especially with the HIPAA combination, is so many of the hospitals are running mobile BYOD devices, Android devices, and wireless. But you're into now a realm that is multifaceted. And yes, it's a good question.
It's not just the hospital. I mean, the hospital, sole practitioner, single doctor running a practice has the
Right.
same requirements as a hospital that has, 5,000 doctors.
That's right.
Exact same requirements. Exactly, have 10% away. It's not.
Yes. But the
And then for
correct. But the thing that they're after is they're after personal information, not so much payment card information. So the idea would be to take and strip out the PCI part here and put in the PHI part here. Over here, you have a better set of requirements in HIPAA, and those are what feed across the top. And then as you and people go through, like the users, the doctors, but also the doctor's staff, and even the contractors that support the doctor, when they go through doing this scoring process, that's where you determine, the risks that are applicable to that small business. And you have to do this over and over again. Typically what I found is you often generate 2 to 3 risks. And if you're familiar with the idea of working what's called the 3-dimensional cube, then you actually take the PCI risk and the PII risk and you feed them against each other again. And then like in yours, you take the PHI risk, you put that in the top and feed it against another risk. And what you'll begin to find is a common pattern. That pattern is your threat landscape. That's what you've got to identify. So yes, very good question. How do you take this and go to the next step and the next one? Thank you. Yes.
My question is, recently working with 2 small companies, they were completely unaware that the policies that they had were flagrantly vulnerable. How do you, and it was a sort of jaw-dropping moment where you're interacting with them and you want to say, quick, okay, here's 15 minutes of consulting right now, you need to stop. How do you start reaching people to say, do you realize what you're doing?
Yes. How do you start
Without
reaching
making them
people?
mad at you.
Yes. One of the things that I've found, and I'm doing this for basically a university from a research study, is what I said to my professor is, I want to volunteer. I want to go out. I want to find 3 companies that will, engage with me on trying to develop this. When I went out, it's very easy to find people that are like, oh, you're not going to charge me for this, but you're going to help me for this. That's actually the best way to get your foot in the door, is you must engage people and show them that, hey, I'm here and I'm trying to do some sort of, adjustment for you. I'm not here to charge you something. Unfortunately, that's not a good business model if you're a startup industry. But let me put it to you this way. This is a big enough thing that I think, if you started up and were able to form like a volunteer group and started this thing, it's like anything else in a startup company today. You look at most of them, they start up, no charge. And 2 years later, what are they doing? They're either covering you with ads or they're charging you for it. So the thing is, yeah, how do you get this started? How do you get people actually aware of it? How do you get people embracing it and using it? I believe that in essence, because what I'm seeing is the industry now is beginning to levy a risk insurance on the small, medium businesses. And that will be what motivates people to come and find the expertise like is in this room, is to say, hey, if I don't have a way of reducing my risk and identifying my risk, the insurance company is going to charge me X amount of money. If something like this works with like a Travelers or an Aetna or, you know, a Hartford type company that is now doing cyber risk insurance, then they will start seeking out people to help them do that. Yes, sir.
Nice to meet you. The presentation has been excellent. My name is Dan. I lead the MD Incident Response team, consulting team for Dustin Works. So right on point.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of questions for you. The 2003 semantic report, one of the things that was stated there was one of the biggest reductions in cost of a breach was preparation, which you addressed thoroughly here, and engagement of an outside, of a third-party consulting firm for systems response. Does any of your research speak to that at all? And how do you reconcile that with the 75% rate of being ignorant to the breach?
Right. That is the biggest thing that I found, and I think probably in the last 6 months, with the amount of information we're seeing, you know, from the espionage type work and from, you know, even the latest here last week, the NSA breaches in there, and a lot of people, a lot of the small medium businesses do pick up, you know, magazines like The Economist, they follow Money Magazine, you know, things like that. When I go in, you know, these are like their sources that are laying around. And I ask them, I say, do you read the magazines? And their answer is yes. And I go, so how aware are you that somebody's already breached you? And they're like, oh, I'm too small. They're not interested in that. And you know, one of the most interesting things is, if you're like myself, a certified ethical hacker, you look at them and say, would you be interested in me seeing just how far I can dive into your business in the next hour? And you know what? Most of them will not even take you up on that. They'll be like, oh, is it that easy? And you look at them and you go, it's already started. I'm social engineering you right now. How do you know who I am? And it sinks in. People will suddenly realize, you know, when you got them, they suddenly, you know, the awareness flags and triggers go off. So yeah, you bring up the question, and what I tell a lot of people, and what I see, you know, in doing the work that I'm doing with you know, the universities I'm attached to, it's really interesting because the approach has now been, I think, in the last 6 months, not if you're going to be breached, but when. And when you tell people that, they go, you know, I work for a large multinational company. You know, our standard joke is, gee, the Chinese probably have more and better intel on our drawings than we do. It's a fact of life. And, you know, as you know, our management and our IT departments tell us, oh, it's getting better, you go, well, what about this article where I just read that the Chinese have all the latest Black Hawk drawings? You know, and you're like, why am I going through all this international trade training? Because they've already got it. You know, so, yeah, with the small medium business, the problem they have is most of them are so unaware that they're not actually ever targeted. What it is somebody's found a new vulnerability and they just basically do a broad reaching, you know, spam this thing out and see how many they catch. And, you know, from the numbers you're seeing, they're catching in the 30 to 40 percentile on the single script kiddie type of vulnerability test. And when that number, you know, in a town like this, with a number of small, medium businesses, that generates a lot of cash very quickly. Remember, a lot of these guys, if it takes them more than a couple minutes to breach a system, they're not interested. So when you look at that 40 or that 60% number, they've been in and out and got the family jewels in under 4 minutes. The bad thing is they've left something behind that's going to continue to mine that data for several more months before somebody catches them. That's what people don't realize. Let me get him.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you did a good job of framing the beginning of the identifying the risks and where the top risks are. Did you go to the next step of identifying what frameworks there are for taking like the first 8% of mitigation and, you know, knocking that part off and then working down to the more difficult mitigating factors?
Right, so the question basically is going back to how do you do the risk framework, or how do you follow through?
So like, for example, you know, SANS top 20 or Australian Defense Ministry.
Right. So this is one of the things that you got to look at in here, and that is none of what I would say the security risk management frameworks, the NIST or the ISO or Corbin or Octave really work. So what you got to do is you got to take those standards, you got to look at what's the 2 pieces or 3 pieces that are important to you from a stakeholder, and then you got to shred these risk frameworks. So what is it I need? So like for instance what I said, the thing I would look at is the NIST standards and the ISO 27000 standards. They have very good checklists. Those checklists can be turned into PCI checklists, hand it to employees and have them rack and stack the checks in there. And again, take the same checklist and go to whether it's PII or PHI or whatever you need it to be, but put the checklist out and get the employees engaged in determining the checklist. Now that you've got the checklist, then the question becomes, do you have the expertise and the people available to you to begin doing the mitigation step? And for that, I believe Octave is the place I would go. It talks about forming work groups. Well, a lot of people look at you like, how do I form a work group? What is a work group? You can quickly point them to standards like this to do it. When you look down here, this is the old kind of granddaddy. This is the risk queue, but in the Australia-New Zealand standard, one of the things it does is it breaks risk mitigation into a waterfall. And it puts metrics on it so you can actually see, gee, I did a mitigation step and I thought it was going to reduce my risk by say 20%. Well, in here, in Australia and in the 3100 standards, you actually grade yourself and your employees grade yourself on how well you did on that mitigation step. And the basic thing there is, if you didn't get half the mitigation step, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble because you quickly could have your risk moving down like this and then have it turn around and move back up on you. Okay? So it's not a simple answer, it's a more complex answer of there's nothing that's really good out there, but there's enough good parts in these 4 standards and others that if you tailor it to your company, you can come up with how to mitigate the risk. And the thing that I want to point out here is you don't want to take this too deep. You don't want to go into generating security requirements and breaking them down to contractors. You will leave 90% of this audience behind. So you've got to keep it to you know, the old thing, 2 to 3 deep, and beyond that, it's too deep. It's not going to work anymore. Does that answer your question? That's how I would approach doing that. But the target is, like I said, you want to keep your information, and you want to generate the output. And that's what will help when you go back through in 3 months or 6 months. Yes.
I just want to understand one of your points about training. Are you advocating that, at least in a small business, actually going through this exercise is sufficient training in and of itself? Because I'd wager that once you kind of cross even the 20 employee mark or so, you're really going to need some more formalized training than
Right. No, the idea here is once you get people into an awareness training, as I said, you kind of got them. I look at a lot of governments have very, very good social engineering training. If you haven't ever been out, I think it's run by the NSA, but it's, I think if you put in OPSEC, Operation Security, for instance, they will go through 2 or 3 social engineering videos. They are awesome. They basically show somebody surfing on the internet with Philadelphia, right? And from there, they're able to actually track how somebody social engineers them 6 months later in the bar to get critical information. I happen to work with the Australians quite a bit, so I would say if you go out on the Australia website and put in, you know, social engineering for risk, they have 2 very interesting videos on there. One of them is somebody steals a laptop. Now we all look at it and say, oh, my laptop's got encryption. It is awesome because they pick the laptop drive out and they put it into a hard disk doubler, and then you create a virtual image of it. And in minutes they shred the encryption on it and read the contents of the laptop. So, you know, my company believes in, you know, strong AES 256. Well, I'm watching a video that takes 45 seconds for somebody to rip that laptop apart and read the contents. It's like, no, it doesn't work. I think I'm there. Any last questions?
Quick question.
Yes, the gentleman that preceded me.
So you have sort of all these frameworks to help you perceive risk and what actual risk.
Right.
Do you find that they actually match the real risk out in the field, or do you think there's a disconnect between the two?
I believe.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, repeating the question is I think what you were saying is, does this generate the real risk or does it mask the risk? It's a bit of both. The idea here is if they don't engage in any risk framework, then they're really bad off. The thing is, yeah, this is not the final point. The real risk frameworks will generate the deep risks, the risks that they've got to get to. But in essence, we've got to have something that they can look at that gets them involved in doing risk management and addressing it. And then once that starts, then hopefully they'll go to the next step, which is the big guys.
Yeah, we'll ask if there's any other questions, if we can carry it on after the break.
Okay.
But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.